I'll never forget the way the words cut through that glittering room. We'd prefer if you left. Amanda's voice was sharp, cold, dripping with the kind of confidence only money and cruelty can buy. Her dress sparkled under the chandelier like it had been stitched from diamonds, and her smile tight, polished, fake was aimed straight at me. I stood there, dripping from the storm outside. My hair clung to my cheeks, damp and wild. My dress, the one I had saved for weeks to buy, was wrinkled and stained with raindrops. The heels, I thought, made me look elegant, now squished uncomfortably against the soaked carpet. And for a moment, no one breathed. The entire room froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, curious, judgmental, amused. Glasses of champagne hovered in midair. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. The music from the string quartet in the corner suddenly sounded too soft, too distant, like even they were ashamed to keep playing. This was supposed to be my moment, my chance to finally feel part of my son's new family. But instead, I felt humiliation burn through me, hotter than the fire crackling in their marble fireplace. I searched for my son, David, my sweet boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and tear-filled eyes, looking for comfort. He stood near Amanda, his tie perfectly knotted, his posture tense. His eyes flickered between me and his wife, and then he lowered them. Not a word of defense. Not even a gesture to take my side. Just silence. That silence cut deeper than Amanda's insult. I could almost hear the whispers sliding across the polished floor like snakes. She's late. Look at her dress. Doesn't she know where she is? Every stare reminded me I didn't belong here. I wasn't one of them, these people who wore their wealth like armor and their arrogance like a crown. I was an intruder in their kingdom. Amanda tilted her head, her perfect curls resting neatly on her bare shoulder. She didn't even try to lower her voice when she said it again. It would be better if you left. My lips parted, but no words came out. Shame pressed heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I could still feel the icy rain on my skin, but the heat of embarrassment was so much worse. I thought of the hours I had spent preparing, practicing polite conversations in the mirror, rehearsing what to say if anyone asked about my small apartment or my modest life. I thought if I looked right, spoke right, behaved right, maybe they would see me as more than just David's poor mother. But all that hope crumbled in one moment under Amanda's gaze. Someone in the crowd chuckled. Another woman smirked behind her champagne glass. The sound of ice clinking against crystal was louder than my pounding heart. I wanted to run. My body screamed to turn around, to escape this mansion where even the walls seemed to judge me. But my feet stayed rooted to the rug, heavy as stone, because leaving meant surrendering. And surrendering meant proving Amanda right, that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't deserve a place in my son's life anymore. David finally looked at me, just for a second, and in his eyes, I saw everything I had feared: guilt, discomfort, but no courage. No defense. The boy I raised, the boy I gave everything for, stood silent while his wife turned me down in front of her glittering guests. That was the moment I realized I was alone, utterly, completely alone. The laughter and chatter of the room slowly resumed, like nothing had happened, but I could feel every set of eyes still burning into me. I was no longer a guest at this party. I was entertainment, the outsider they could all whisper about later. And as Amanda turned away, satisfied with her victory, I felt something shift deep inside me. Humiliation has a strange taste, bitter, sharp, unforgettable. But sometimes beneath the shame, it sparks something stronger. I didn't know it yet, but standing in that mansion, soaked and humiliated, was the beginning of something else entirely. The beginning of my quiet, steady rage, the kind of rage that waits, watches, and plans. After the party, I couldn't sleep, even as I lay in my bed. Hours later, the scene replayed again and again. Amanda's voice like ice, my son's silence like a knife. Every whisper, every smirk, every sideways glance was carved into my memory. But truth is, this wasn't the first time. Their insults had never been so loud before, but the quiet cuts, the little humiliations, those had been there since the beginning. I think back to when David first brought Amanda home. She stepped into my small apartment, her perfect manicure tapping against her designer purse, and I remember how her eyes darted around the room. The old couch, the mismatched curtains, the faint smell of soup simmering in the kitchen. It's very cozy, she had said, but her tone made cozy sound like an insult. I had smiled anyway, eager to please, pretending not to hear the judgment dripping from her voice. That was the first round, and many more followed. The wedding, I wore the nicest dress I owned, navy blue, simple but respectable. To me, it was dignity. To them, I could tell it was something else. Amanda's mother had introduced me to guests as David's mother from the city, not even using my name, as if I were an anonymous inconvenience, a shadow attached to their golden son-in-law. I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was David's happiness. If I swallowed my pride, if I stayed quiet, maybe Amanda would warm to me. Maybe her family would soften. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Tea dinners. They placed me at the far end of the table, far from the conversations that mattered. When I tried to join in, my comments were met with polite smiles, then ignored. Like I was invisible. Amanda always found ways to remind me of my place. That's an interesting opinion, she would say sweetly, before changing the subject to something I couldn't possibly contribute to: vacations in Europe, hedge fund profits, designer handbags, and my son. My sweet David. He tried. I could see him trying. He would squeeze my hand under the table sometimes, a small act of comfort. But in the big moments, the ones that really mattered, he stayed silent, trapped between loyalty to his wife and love for his mother. And each time he chose silence, I bled a little more inside. I gave so much. Always giving. Always sacrificing. That's what mothers do, right? I gave up nights of sleep when he was a baby. I gave up my own meals when money was tight so he could eat. I gave up new clothes for myself so he could wear something decent to school. And when my husband died, I gave everything I had left just to keep David's world steady. But standing in that mansion, dripping wet while Amanda mocked me, I realized something painful. All those sacrifices didn't matter here. To her family, I was still nothing, just the poor mother, the outsider who would never belong. I thought about the storm that delayed me that night, how I'd pulled over to help a stranger whose car had broken down. My coat was soaked, my hair ruined, my dress stained, but I couldn't drive past. Not when someone needed help. I had chosen kindness over appearances, and that choice had cost me the last shred of respect Amanda's family pretended to give. But lying in bed that night, I wondered, was it really a loss? Or was it the first glimpse of who I truly was, compared to them? Because maybe the real shame wasn't mine. Maybe the shame belonged to people who measured worth in money, jewelry, and designer dresses. Instead of kindness, that thought planted itself in my chest, small but alive. It didn't erase the hurt. It didn't erase the humiliation. But it gave me something else, a seed. And seeds, given enough time, grow. The week before the party, a dinner told me everything I needed to know. The Whitman Country Club. The air smelled like polish and old rules. A hostess led us to a long table in white linen. They seated me at the far end. David sat near the center beside Amanda and her parents. Between us ran a river of crystal and laughter. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him, like watching my son through a closed window. A waiter poured sparkling water I didn't ask for. The woman on my left talked about a lake villa. The man on my right explained tax strategies. When I mentioned the community pantry where I volunteer, they smiled politely and drifted away. The middle of the table, the real dinner happened. Richard told stories about quarterly gains and strategic pruning. People laughed when he laughed. Patricia offered compliments that cut. So brave to wear flats, Margaret. Comfort over fashion, how practical. I glanced at my plain shoes. They had been my husband's favorite. Before appetizers, Amanda leaned toward me. Please try not to make this emotional, she said softly. Dad invited partners. We want everything smooth. Emotional? I asked. You know, she said, eyes skimming me. Stories, opinions, the personal stuff. My throat tightened. My life is the personal stuff. I nodded because it was easier than fighting. Courses came and went. Tiny food on large plates. I watched David's profile while he listened to his father-in-law. He looked like a man in a uniform that didn't fit. Sometimes he glanced down the table toward me, then looked away when Richard spoke his name. I imagined putting my hand on his shoulder like when he was small. I'm here. You're safe. But in this room, safety belonged to the loudest voices. Dessert was when it broke. Patricia raised her glass. To family, she said. To standards. Richard flagged the club photographer. Let's get a picture of the family. I started to stand. Amanda's hand touched my wrist. Just immediate family, she murmured, smiling for the room while making the cut. It photographs cleaner. Cleaner. I sat back down. My chair felt smaller. They gathered by the fireplace. Richard sure, Patricia flawless, Amanda glowing, David obedient. The flash popped again and again. A wall of smiles without me. The woman from the villa leaned close. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'm never in my daughter-in-law's photos either." When they returned, Amanda pretended nothing had happened. "How's the pear tart?" she asked brightly. "It's lovely," I said, and tasted nothing. The check came. As we stood to leave, I heard Richard tell the manager, "Next month's gala reserve 12. Place the Sullivan seat near the windows." No one there had the last name Sullivan but me. Near the windows meant near the draft. Near the place where you wait to be forgotten. On our way out, I saw something I wasn't meant to see. Amanda and Richard pulled the photographer aside. She pointed to the camera screen, then to me. The photographer nodded and scrolled. The image with me at the edge, the one where I had tried to stand, vanished with a swipe, erased. Outside, the night was cold. The parking lot lights showed the salt on my shoes and the way David hesitated between us. He kissed my cheek. "Drive safe, Mom." "Of course," I said. He lingered. Then Amanda called his name, and the moment folded shut. A tea home. I made tea and sat at my small kitchen table. I wrote a list on the back of a receipt. Things I know. I wrote, "They will not choose me." I wrote, "They prefer me silent." I wrote, "David is kind but afraid." And then the last line, the one that steadied my breathing, "I am not done speaking." I folded the paper and tucked it into my wallet, next to a photo of David with missing teeth and summer knees. Some cages are made of gold and rules. Some are made of silence. And some break the moment you decide you're not staying inside. Humiliation is heavy, but silence is heavier. By the night of the Whitman's Christmas gala, I was already carrying years of quiet cuts on my back. Each polite smile that dismissed me. Each seat at the far end of the table. Each erased photograph. I told myself this time would be different. I told myself this party was my chance. Instead, it became my breaking point. When I walked into their mansion that night, the storm had followed me inside. My hair damp, my dress wrinkled, my heels clicking against marble that shone brighter than anything I'd ever owned. And Amanda, glowing in gold silk, met me with words that burned. "We'd prefer if you left." The room froze. Guests stared. David lowered his eyes, but the worst was still to come. Dinner began like a performance. Silver trays glided across the table. Guests laughed at stories about investments and European summers. I chewed each bite like it was sawdust. Then Patricia leaned forward, her pearls catching the chandelier light. "So, Margaret," she said sweetly, "do you still volunteer at that little pantry?" I nodded. "Yes, we help about 100 families a week." A pause. Then laughter, soft, but sharp enough to cut. One man joked about playing charity for fun. Another whispered something that made his wife cover a smile with her napkin. Amanda tilted her head, eyes gleaming. "It's very noble, Margaret. Though, you must admit, it doesn't really compare to running a company, does it?" My cheeks burned. I wanted to shout that feeding a child mattered more than any stock portfolio. But the words stuck. The wine glasses clinked. The fire crackled, and I sat in silence, humiliated again. It should have ended there, but Amanda wasn't finished. After dessert, she excused herself, only to return moments later with 2 of her cousins in tow. She gestured at me like I was a curiosity. "This is Margaret," she said brightly, "David's mom. She's very simple." Simple. The word echoed in my ears. Simple like unworthy, simple like disposable. Her cousins giggled. One of them looked me up and down. "Oh, she's adorable," she whispered. The guests laughed, not cruelly loud, but just enough. Enough to let me know I was the evening's entertainment. I felt my hands tremble under the tablecloth. My heart pounded so hard I thought they might see it through my dress. And David? He sat frozen. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. His eyes begged me not to make a scene, not to embarrass him. That was the moment something snapped inside me. For years, I had bent myself into silence, smiled when they dismissed me, swallowed the humiliation so David wouldn't have to choose between us. But as I sat there, surrounded by chandeliers and champagne, I realized silence wasn't protecting him. It was destroying me, and worse, it was teaching Amanda she could keep erasing me forever. I pushed my chair back. The sound scraped across the marble like a warning bell. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned. I stood. My hands no longer shook. My voice came out steady, stronger than I felt. You wanted me to leave earlier, Amanda, I said softly, but the quiet pulled every ear toward me. Maybe I should, but before I do, I want you to know something. The room froze again. Amanda's smile wavered. For years, I've tried to be part of this family. I've tried to fit into your world, no matter how small you made me feel. But kindness is not weakness, and silence is not consent. Gasps rippled across the table. Patricia's pearls shifted against her throat. Richard's jaw tightened. Amanda's face flushed, but she forced a laugh. You're being dramatic, Margaret. No one meant, but I cut her off. For once, I didn't let her finish. No, I said, louder now. You meant it. Every smirk, every whisper, every time you reminded me that I wasn't enough. You wanted me invisible, but I'm not invisible. Not anymore. The silence after my words was deafening. I didn't wait for their response. I turned, shoulders straight, head high, and walked out of that glittering cage. Outside, the night air was sharp against my face. My breath came fast, but not from fear, from freedom. I knew what I had just done. I had declared war, and for the first time in years, I felt alive when I slammed the heavy doors of the Whitman mansion behind me. The cold winter air hit my face like a baptism. I had walked out. For the first time, I didn't swallow their insults. I didn't stay quiet for David's sake. I didn't pretend I belonged where I wasn't wanted. My body shook not from the cold, but from the surge of something powerful. Anger, relief, fire. For years, I thought silence was strength. That endurance proved dignity. But in the echo of Amanda's laughter, I finally understood. Silence had only chained me. That night, back in my small apartment, I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor until the carpet grew warm beneath my bare feet. My tea went cold on the table. Every word Amanda had said rang in my ears, simple, embarrassing, leave. But this time, the shame didn't swallow me whole. Instead, something else began to grow inside me. A seed of revenge. Not the reckless kind that destroys everything in its path. No, this was quieter, sharper. The kind that waits for the right soil. The kind that grows roots before it shows leaves. I sat down at my kitchen table and pulled out my wallet. Inside was a business card. Heavy, embossed, expensive. Eleanor Whitman, Amanda's grandmother. The woman I had stopped to help on the icy road. The stranger whose car I'd restarted with nothing but coke and stubbornness. I ran my fingers over the raised letters. Her blue eyes flashed in my memory, sharp, watchful, almost amused when she realized who I was. T the party. She had said little, but she had seen everything. I knew it. Maybe it was foolish hope, but I sensed something in her, something Amanda didn't have. Eleanor didn't look through people. She looked at them. She had studied me with the same intensity she used to study her family, and unlike the others, she hadn't flinched at my ruined dress or wet hair. Could she be the soil my seed of revenge needed? The thought was dangerous. This was Amanda's grandmother, the matriarch. Aligning with her could mean survival or destruction. But one thing was clear. Amanda underestimated me. She thought her words had broken me, that her glittering smile had won. She was wrong. I wasn't broken. I was sharpening. Over the next days, I began to remember every humiliation differently. Not as scars, but as evidence. Proof of who they were and who I wasn't. Patricia's pearls glinting as she dismissed me. Richard's jaw tightening when I dared to speak. Amanda's perfect lips twisting around the word simple. All of it fueled me. I thought about David too. My son. My silence had protected him for years. But now I wondered, had it really? Or had it only shown him that love meant obedience, even in the face of cruelty? No more. If I wanted to protect David, if I wanted to protect myself, I couldn't keep playing their game. I needed to change the board. So I pressed Eleanor's card flat on the table, smoothed the edges, and made a decision. I would not beg for a place in their world. I would not wait for Amanda's approval. Instead, I would remind them what real strength looked like. Not wealth, not pearls, not photographs without me. Kindness, resilience, truth. And with Eleanor watching, I had the strange feeling that the Whitman empire was not as solid as Amanda believed. Cracks had been forming for years. And maybe, just maybe, I was the storm that would bring the whole house shaking. That night, I slipped the card back into my wallet, next to the note I had written at the club. I am not done speaking. The words pulsed against my chest like a heartbeat. Amanda thought she had silenced me. She had no idea she had just given me my voice. The invitation came 3 weeks later. A cream-colored envelope with gold trim slid through my mailbox. heavier than any paper I'd ever held. Inside, in perfect calligraphy, were the words, Whitman family gathering. Attendance expected. Expected. Not requested. Not invited. Expected. I almost laughed. Amanda's family had spent years treating me as invisible, and now suddenly, I was expected. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to stay home, drink my tea, and let them rot in their marble castle. But then I thought of Amanda's voice, dripping with poison. We'd prefer if you left. And the seed of revenge inside me whispered, go. When I arrived, their mansion glowed like a stage set. Chandeliers burned through frosted windows, and cars lined the circular drive like trophies. My heart hammered, but my spine stayed straight. I would not bend again. Inside, the air was warm with perfume and expensive wine. Voices floated around me, smooth and sharp. Amanda noticed me first. Her smile faltered, then froze back into place. Oh. She said brightly to brightly, Margaret, you came. I was expected, I replied. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The crowd shifted when Eleanor entered. Amanda's grandmother moved slowly, but the room bent around her. Her silver hair glimmered under the lights, her blue eyes cutting sharper than any diamond. And those eyes found me. She crossed the room without hesitation, her hand cool but firm as it closed around mine. I'm glad you came, Margaret, she said loudly enough for others to hear. We have much to talk about. The murmurs began immediately. Guests craned their necks. Amanda's mother stiffened. Richard's jaw ticked. We moved to the dining hall, where a table longer than my entire apartment stretched under chandeliers. I was seated near Eleanor this time, not at the distant edge. That alone made Amanda's lips twitch with annoyance. Dinner began with scripted politeness, wine poured, toasts raised, the usual parade of wealth and self-importance. But Eleanor had other plans. Halfway through the main course, she set down her fork and cleared her throat. The room hushed instantly. I've been thinking, she began, her voice smooth but iron beneath, about what truly built this family. About the values we seem to have misplaced. Richard chuckled nervously. Mother, this is hardly the time for it. It is exactly the time. Eleanor cut in. Her gaze swept the table, landing finally on me. Some of you have forgotten what integrity looks like, but I was reminded recently by Margaret. My stomach flipped. All eyes turned. She sacrificed her own appearance, her comfort, even her dignity, to help me on the roadside during a storm, Eleanor continued. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She simply acted with kindness, with courage, with resourcefulness. Qualities this family once held dear. Murmurs rippled through the table. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but this time, it wasn't humiliation. It was power. Amanda's laugh rang false. Grandmother, really? She just poured soda on a battery. Let's not make it. Eleanor's hand slammed the table, sharp as a gunshot. Do not interrupt me. The room froze. Amanda's mouth snapped shut. Eleanor's voice softened, but it carried to every corner. How many of you would have stopped that night? How many of you, dressed for a party, would ruin your clothes to help a stranger? None? That's what I thought. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. She leaned back, eyes glittering. We built our name on grit, not glitter. On work, not whispers. Somewhere along the way, appearances became more important than actions. That ends tonight. Richard shifted. Mother, with respect. Respect? Eleanor cut him off again. Respect is earned. Margaret earned mine when she chose humanity over vanity. And you all tried to shame her for it. Her gaze flicked to Amanda. Especially you. Amanda paled, her smile gone. Gasps echoed across the table. Patricia reached for her wine like it was a shield, and in that moment, I realized the power had shifted. For years, they had made me feel small. Tonight, Eleanor had placed me at the center, not as a guest, not as an outsider. As proof that their empire of polish and pearls had forgotten its roots. Proof that strength didn't always wear a silk dress or sit at the head of the table. The whispers started again, but now they weren't about my wrinkles or my dress. They were about Eleanor's words, about me, and for the first time in years, I sat at that table without shrinking, because humiliation no longer burned. Now it fueled me. The air in the dining hall felt charged, like a storm trapped inside crystal walls. Eleanor's words still echoed. Margaret earned my respect, and you all tried to shame her for it. Amanda sat frozen, her painted smile shattered. Richard toyed with his fork, jaw clenched. Patricia's pearls trembled against her collarbone. But I sat taller than I ever had, for the first time. I wasn't the one shrinking in this family. They were. Eleanor leaned toward me, her hand resting lightly on mine. Margaret, she said, her voice clear enough for every guest to hear, you remind me of myself, of what built this family before titles and money blinded us. The whispers swelled. I saw heads turning, eyes flicking between Eleanor and me like a tennis match. Amanda finally found her voice. Grandmother, with respect, you can't just elevate, can't? Eleanor's blue eyes sharpened like glass. Amanda, I built this empire when your grandfather was still a schoolteacher. Don't tell me what I can and cannot do. The room gasped. People had always whispered that Eleanor was just a figurehead, letting the men handle business. Tonight, that story burned to ashes. Amanda sputtered. But she doesn't belong here. That word, belong, the same word that had stalked me for years. The same word Amanda had used as a weapon. Something inside me cracked open. I may not belong to your world of pearls and profit, I said, my voice trembling at first, then steadying. But I belong to myself, and to my son, and I will not let you erase me again. The room fell silent. Even the fire seemed to pause. David's head jerked up. His eyes, my son's eyes, met mine. For the first time all evening, he spoke. Mom's right. The words were soft, but they shook the table harder than Eleanor's hand had. Amanda whipped toward him. David, no, he said firmly, louder now. I should have defended her a long time ago. I let you all treat her like she was less, like she didn't matter, but she does. She always has. The silence that followed was electric. I felt my chest tighten, not with pain this time, but with something warmer. Pride, relief. My son had finally found his voice. Eleanor smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. There it is, she murmured. Courage skips a generation sometimes, but it always returns. Richard cleared his throat, desperate to reclaim control. Mother, this is exactly what it is, Eleanor interrupted. Course correction. Margaret has the integrity this family needs. And David, it seems, has finally remembered the backbone she gave him. The room buzzed with low murmurs. I could feel the power tilting, shifting like the floor beneath us had moved. For years, I had been a shadow in their grand halls. Tonight, I was their mirror reflecting everything they didn't want to see. Amanda's face twisted, her mask slipping. This is humiliating, she hissed. You're making a spectacle. I looked at her calmly. No, Amanda, I'm telling the truth, and the truth doesn't need a mask. Her eyes blazed, but her words failed her. For once, Amanda, the woman who always had a cutting remark ready, was silent. Eleanor rose slowly, and the entire room followed, as if gravity itself demanded it. Margaret will not be dismissed again, she declared. From this night forward, her voice will be heard. My heart pounded. My hands trembled under the tablecloth, but I kept my chin high, because in that moment, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the poor widow in the wrinkled dress. I was a woman who had endured storms, buried her husband, raised her son alone, and survived years of polite cruelty. And now, I was the one they had to listen to. The reversal was complete, and Amanda knew it. It's strange, the way storms end, not with thunder, not with lightning, but with silence. Months passed after that night in the Whitman mansion, but the silence I carried was no longer shameful. It was powerful. Eleanor kept her word. She placed me beside her in meetings, introduced me to people who had only ever looked past me, and gave me responsibilities that mattered. I wasn't just David's mother anymore. I was Margaret, a woman with a voice, a woman whose choices mattered. A T first. Amanda tried to fight it. She tightened her smile, made snide comments under her breath, tried to turn family dinners into battlegrounds. But something had shifted. The room no longer tilted in her favor. Every cruel word bounced back at her. Every sneer revealed her insecurity. She had lost the power she once wielded so easily because Eleanor had handed me a place at the table. And David, my son, something changed in him too. He stood taller. He called more often. He no longer whispered apologies when Amanda cut me down, because Amanda no longer could. He looked at me with pride, the kind of pride I thought I'd lost forever. One night, after a long meeting at the Whitman offices, he walked me to my car. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice quiet. For what? I asked. For all the years I didn't defend you. His eyes glistened. I thought silence would keep the peace, but it only kept you alone. I touched his cheek, just like I used to when he was small. You found your voice when it mattered most. That's enough. For the first time in years, we didn't feel like two people separated by a gulf of wealth and expectations. We felt like mother and son again. Amanda, on the other hand, grew restless. The glittering image she had polished so carefully began to crack. People whispered that she was cold, cruel, self-absorbed. The very things she tried to paint onto me were now sticking to her. And Richard, always so certain, so commanding, found his authority slipping as Eleanor reasserted her place. His voice grew quieter in meetings, his temper shorter at family gatherings. The empire he thought he controlled was no longer his. Poetic, really. The ones who told me to leave were now the ones losing ground. One snowy evening, I found myself driving past the Whitman estate. The house glowed with Christmas lights, just as it had that first humiliating night. Cars lined the driveway. Laughter floated through the frosted glass. But this time, I didn't stop. I parked on the hill above, turned off my headlights, and just watched. The mansion looked beautiful from a distance, glowing like a jewel in the snow. But I no longer longed to be inside. I no longer ached for their approval, because I had learned something important. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't forcing your way into their world, it's realizing you don't need it. They once told me, "We'd prefer if you left." And for years, those words haunted me. But now, they feel different. Now, they remind me of the moment I stopped begging to belong. I rolled down my window. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. I let the silence settle around me, calm and steady. Inside that glowing mansion, they would go on smiling. For photographs, raising glasses, pretending. But they could never gather again without my shadow at their table, without remembering the night Eleanor placed her hand on mine and rewrote the rules. And me? I drove home to my quiet apartment. My modest kitchen, my warm little life. It wasn't gilded. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. And that, in the end, was triumph enough.